614 Startups Nation, welcome to another episode of the 614 Startups Podcast. My name is Elio Harmon, your host, and I'm so excited to be back with you for another episode of the podcast. Now, as we do every single time, now that we've expanded our format, we're going to do a little bit of news, we're going to do a little bit of social media, and then we're going to look at our events page and see what's coming up, all right? So we're going to kick it off with a little bit of what I found in the news that got me excited this week. And it's an article from Columbus Business First. And the article is entitled Equal Playing Field. I thought that was a great play on words. And this has to do with how minority and women-owned businesses are building on their strengths to help finish the Columbus Crew new stadium. So exciting news for Columbus, Ohio. We were able to keep the Columbus Crew. There were a lot of conversations around the Crew moving cities. And one of the conversations was centered around them getting a new stadium, right? Matt Frey Stadium has been retired. They're going to be paying, I think it's called the Nordec. And part of this process was the Crew and the city being very intentional about how contracts were awarded for building the new Crew Stadium. I know some goals were set, and you can kind of dig into this article if you happen to be a subscriber of Columbus Business First, like I am. But the goal was 30%, and they came pretty close, right, in terms of awarding contracts for this. The goal was 30%. I think they got to 25%, which is a step in the right direction. There are a lot of companies that are named in here. There were some of the notable ones that received contracting from, I think, design and also general contracting, construction as well. But one of the things that really stood out to me was the partnership that developed from this. So if you're thinking about reinvestment or equaling the playing field, the Crew Stadium is just one project. That's great when you can accomplish your goals in terms of diversity when it comes to contractors on a single project. We'll dig into the numbers a little bit. And I think I love digging into the numbers because when you're looking at percentages, it's not always as reflective. So 59.9 million to minority and women-owned businesses contracted as of March. Total contracted amount is $227 million. Now, separate from the stadium itself, was the training facility. As you can see there, 21 million total contracted, 7.3 went to minority and women-owned businesses, and you see the numbers for consulting there. But what was interesting to me was a partnership that developed, and I hope I'm saying this right, between Cecily Construction and what would traditionally be viewed as a competitor. I'm going to try to find it here. Because what ended up happening was that Matt McLennan and Miles McLennan actually partnered with Cecily Construction to basically enter into kind of a joint venture, allowing them to launch a third construction company, with Cecily taking a majority stake in that third construction company, which will allow now a majority stake owned, minority-owned construction company, positioning them to be able to bid on much bigger jobs. Part of the issue with putting out these contracts is scale, right? And so when you're bidding on a contract, you have to be able to bid within what you can deliver on. And so that's why you see in some circumstances, minority-owned firms are getting contracts that are maybe a little bit smaller. Maybe they're not the lead builder or construction company on a lot of these projects. And so I thought it was brilliant. Kudos to Cecily Construction and Miles McLennan. And Miles McLennan for actually having the vision to develop a partnership like this, even though they realized that they might be creating a competitor for themselves, even though that they're involved in this partnership. So kudos to Cecily Construction. Hopefully we can get some of the people who are in this article on the show. I would love to hear what those conversations are like, bidding on contracts for the city. This was a great article. I think this is a very positive thing for the city. I hope that we can see more and more of this as we go on down the line. All right. quick pivot to social media. I don't have any accounts that I want to highlight today, but kind of I'm making this a regular routine of sending you folks back and reminding you about our YouTube page. All right, so that thing is over there trying to grow up on us. All right, but it's 32 subscribers. Listen, if I had a talk and there was a room of 32 people, what would I do? I would deliver an outstanding talk. To the 32 subscribers out there, we're going to keep delivering you outstanding content. For those of you who have not hit that subscribe button yet, what's the holdup, man? You're part of the nation. You follow us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, you're on Twitter, you're all over the place. You need to come over and join us on YouTube. For a long time, this podcast was audio only, which I understand. A lot of people don't realize we now have video. This is a great place to go be part of the community, engage with us, and share our content. So hit that subscribe button, all right? Last but not least is an event that came into my inbox, and I was like, hold on, who am I hanging out with? You get this invite, and you're like, who are my friends? Because I got this invite, lifted Black-owned small businesses in the thriving cannabis industry, all right? So, guys, if you don't know about cannabis, I had another guest on the show, Paul Reeder. We just recorded his podcast. Podcast comes out in a couple of weeks. No, actually, that's the lead into his podcast, what we're doing right now. I was talking to him, and he was talking about a big Fortune 200 company that's making a big investment in the cannabis space, right? And lifted, and how can we as Black-owned companies participate in this thriving cannabis industry? Of course, this comes from my friends over at the U. This is going to be an event at the U, so check it out. You can go to our website, 614startups.com/events. Go ahead and register. Support this. A lot of local founders, a lot of advice. This will be a sold-out event, so do not sleep on this. Get registered and participate. All right, now coming up next, my guy Paul Reeder, Executive Director over at the Center for Innovation at The Ohio State University, Fisher College of Business. Enjoy. 614 Startups Nation, welcome to another episode of the 614 Startups Podcast. My name is Elio Harmon, your host, and I have a very, very special guest in the building. I have been waiting for this conversation for some time. And I'm excited. I think you guys are going to learn a lot. We have a very experienced entrepreneur joining us tonight, Mr. Paul Reeder, Executive Director of the Center for Innovation Strategies at The Ohio State University Fisher College of Business. Before I introduce my guest, I do have to give a shout out to our featured partner tonight, Color Coded Labs. It's time for a better career in tech. Introducing Color Coded Labs, a 16-week boot camp that does more than teach basic code. It's a program designed to help you actually get a career in tech. At Color Coded Labs, we've removed all the barriers to help you learn the skills you need to start a career you love in weeks and not years. All designed for people of color by people of color. Apply now at colorcodedlabs.com. All right, big shout out to Color Coded Labs, a brand new partner on the show. Great to have you guys as part of the 614 Startups family. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited. Having listened to these podcasts, I've got to, I've got to step up and make sure that we're entertaining and informative.
Listen, you with Ohio State, you're very clutch. I know that. No worries. You could handle the pressure, all right? You're used to the big time games over there. All right, so let's jump right into this thing. I wanted to bring in an experienced entrepreneur. You have the beard to prove it, all right? You've been in the game for some time now. Usually I have the younger folks who are kind of on their first go round. You know, they could use some wisdom, all right? But we're going to start with a bit of your background, personal and professional, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Great.
Go ahead and start. Wherever you'd like to
start.
I
get to jump in. Okay,
background.
so I have a unique pathway, I believe, in that I'm an industrial designer by education, and the reality of that degree is that it set me on a path immediately when I graduated from Ohio State to move to Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley really was what it's known for today. I mean, I moved out there to work for Hewlett Packard. Again, when tech was just starting to blow up, and had an opportunity to work in a huge instrument division in Santa Clara. So what better than to start off a discussion around entrepreneurship than somebody who actually started their career, in this land of opportunity that every startup seems to think is also the land of milk and honey, right? So that's how I started. I was a designer working for Hewlett Packard. We did our first startup then, concept called Mailbox 24, where we put commercial mailboxes in 7-Eleven stores. And that didn't go so well. But you know what? When you're 22, this is what you have to do. You got to get out there and throw something, out into the world and see what works. From there, actually came back to the Midwest and started to work for a company who did product development innovation, specifically a firm that was a really wide-ranging design and development firm at the time. I mean, Federal Express was one of our largest clients, so we had an opportunity to work across a huge spectrum for them. Started my own product development innovation firm in 1989. I mean, imagine that's was I launched a firm before maybe a lot of the listeners or other folks you've had on the show kind of were alive. But you know what? This is the thing I really want to stress is that age doesn't have a thing to do with your ability to be creative and create a company, right? Doesn't matter whether you're 22 or in my case 60, that I can, get out there and launch something new. And so to me, it was really exciting to be able to be working with all sorts of companies, creating new ideas for them. And I just continued to work upstream. Like it was never my thought to be, I was going to be this designer and I'm going to sit there at the end when somebody gives me a specification and build this thing out. We were always thinking about the business use case. And so we actually decided to put our money where our mouth was. And we launched our first true product, even though we had been running the consulting firm. So in some cases, you might consider that to be entrepreneurial. We didn't. I considered that I was generally unemployable. So I should try to, I'm the only one I'm going to be able to work for. So I should have my own firm. But then we decided that we wanted to really get into to product development on our own terms. And so we launched our first actual product, physical product in the sporting goods industry in '94. We were lucky, maybe lucky isn't the right word. We were fortunate to have done a really good development process, and we were recognized with this IDA Gold Award by Business Week magazine, and which really helped to launch the product because it got great press, and we were on the front page of the lifestyle section of New York Times when the first product launched, and we were in the Washington Post and really got some great press for us, which got my career started as being recognized as an entrepreneur at the time, because it was, again, a bit of a rarity, I think, specifically in the sporting goods industry, to have a small Midwest company create a product and want to take on a company the size of Speedo. I mean, this is all the same, context of coming into an industry that was absolutely ruled by one 90% market share kind of company. However, it wasn't very niche-y, right? So it's not like I was jumping in against Microsoft. This was still a niche industry, but because I had such an interest in sporting goods, that it was a great fit for me. And then we sold that company in 2012 to Aqualung. This was the company that was started by Jacques Cousteau, the first guy to do underwater scuba equipment. And then that company also brought in Michael Phelps, swimmer that people might be familiar with. And now he's taken all of our original products under his own MP brand. That's part of the Aquasphere line. So that's pretty exciting to see, maybe the best known and certainly the most accomplished swimmer training with our gear. And I came to Ohio State after we sold the company and finished up our consulting arrangement that we had as part of our acquisition. I came to Ohio State in 2012, and we launched a group called the Ideation Lab, where we were instrumental in helping to evaluate this portfolio of 1,600 some patents that Ohio State owns, and try to identify startup potentials or platforms where we could use our design and development approach to accelerate towards a wider use of patent, or accelerate the licensing as part of the tech transfer process at Ohio State. Then, and to wrap this intro up, in 2016, I came in and we had created the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, housed out of the Fisher College at Ohio State. And then in 2018, we decided to separate the two. There's now a Keenan Center for Entrepreneurship at Ohio State. And then we created a Center for Innovation Strategies, focusing more on an overarching innovation platform for our corporate partners. And the coolest thing about that, transitioning this back, Elio, is that because of the way the center structure works at Ohio State, we're completely externally funded, which makes us a bit of a startup, but a startup with a 150-year-old brand behind us. So isn't that that's a really good way to have a startup, is a brand that everybody recognizes and a call that most people will take when you say you're from Ohio State. So
Yeah,
is
a
that how's
150-year-old brand, right? A lot of goodwill in the community and a fanatical fan base, right?
yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, the dog bowl is Ohio State. You know, the sticker on the mailbox is Ohio State. And
Yeah.
so not a bad brand to walk
Well, I
into a room
mean,
with.
600,000 alumni, spread out across the world. There's not a single company that if I said I want to talk to somebody about some aspect of something we're working on, that I can't call and generally at least get someone to answer my call. That's a huge amount of power, to be able to have, to be able to get your foot in the door when you're really trying to launch a new venture, within a large organization like Ohio State.
So when you mention HP, and this is a little
Yeah,
bit kind of, and I know you're in the kind of Center for Innovation and you're dealing with a lot of corporations. I don't mean to
yeah,
have you kind of talk about something that might feel like throwing a company under the bus, but when you
yeah,
say HP, I mean in the 80s, I mean you're talking about a venerable company. And one of the things that came to mind was Jim Collins' book, Built to Last.
yeah,
And I'm thinking culture at HP. So, first
yeah.
job working at that venerable company, what were some of the takeaways, culture wise, in terms of the way they thought, the way they saw the world? What were the things that really left an impression with you working with that company then? And let's talk
Yeah.
about what happens to companies over time that you can have a leader in the space that becomes a laggard. Not
Yeah.
calling them a
You know,
laggard, but maybe losing their position
no, I think that,
of
yeah,
where
I
they
think
are, they were before.
I think there was a lot of luster that got um, muddled up with HP, right?
Mhm.
The interesting thing for me, you got to think back. I mean, I started at HP in 1983. Hewlett and Packard were still alive. I mean, I actually get to ride on an elevator with them. And so to me, coming out of school, this was a great environment because it was a huge organization, no doubt, but it had the culture of a startup. And I know that that's really strange for people to say, well, when did HP have that? This was a manufacturing division that had all of the other support functions in the same place. So it wasn't as if we were segregated away from the operations of the company. We got to see every part of how the company operated. The other thing that they had it really struck me culturally is that they had this concept called management by wandering. I mean, they wanted you to go and wander around and talk to other people about what you did, what was your job, and what was the challenge that you had, and how can I help you with that? That's a different culture than most people would come into a corporate culture within, right? And project teams really considered startups. So our project team was 7 people whose job it was to get that product launched. Yes, within a bigger structure, yes, within, a different financial model of support, but you were still, left to your own team to build that thing out. And so for me, it was a fantastic culture to be within, particularly because I got to work with software engineers. I mean, I was one of the first designers at HP who was working on user experience and user interface on software systems. HP was the first company to do a touch screen on a personal computer, you know. And so I think what probably happened, and I'm certainly no, you know, great scholar on the process at HP, but I think they forgot about the garage. We always talked about the garage when I was there, that's where Hewlett and Packard started and drove it. And I think companies forget about that. As they become public entities, they start thinking about shareholders and they quit thinking about end users and end customers and the empathy for that group, and you get lost in your mission, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. It's hard to keep. It is very hard to keep because people come
Yeah,
and go, and times change, and then you have pressure from the street, and there are
yeah,
a lot of things that are constantly kind of slowly but surely eroding some of the things that make a company great,
yeah,
including losing focus on what matters, or maybe that core product or core customer, trying to do
yeah.
many things.
Oh no, I think I talk a lot about to me, the entrepreneurial paradox. A startup generally gets started because they believe there's something missing in a market that isn't addressed by a larger organization, right? But then the first thing so many startups start talking about is, how do I get my A round? How do I scale so I can be a big company? How can I be acquired by a big company? Isn't that a paradox? Like, this is partly why I'm drawn to lifestyle businesses so often, because I like the lifestyle business that says I want to build a company for me. I want to run the company. I want to employ people. And so I think there's a real paradox in that notion of losing track of what your mission is when you're a startup and you begin to focus on raising money instead of focus on finding the problem, or focus on, like, let's start looking at revenue generation and not at funding everything, right? I think that's a real challenge with startups, to lose their mission. They start falling in love with their solution instead of falling in love with the problem.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of human nature kind of wars against that a little bit, right? And I was
Yeah,
just had a conversation with Ryan Frederick, and we had this extended conversation around finding your niche, right? That core customer that you can grow with, and really build a company that solves a problem, and have customers that really, really have an affinity for your brand. Let's talk
yeah,
about going up against a giant, right? Because you've
yeah.
done that in your company, you've done it successfully. But it was so funny when you sent me over some notes about things that we could talk about. When somebody says I was sued by Speedo, my mind automatically goes to the gutter. Like, what are you doing with their products that made them sue you? So why don't you fill people in on what happened? Because it seems
you
like
know
you successfully dealt
it's
with
funny,
that
as a
and exit.
startup. That was one of my favorite days. I think it's partly because I was stupid. Um, but to me, when we got that letter from Speedo's attorney saying that they were going to sue us for copyright infringement, I was delighted. Now think about that. And you're like, so you really were a stupid person, right? I was like, no, no, because to me, that biggest industry player, the person that I grew up, the company that I grew up, you ask anybody in the world, swimming Speedo, fantastic brand, good for the sport. I'm not going to complain about that. But the fact that they acknowledged that I was a threat, little tiny company making a couple of pieces of training equipment, was a threat to them. Now you might say, come on, you're not really a threat. We know that. But at some point, they spent some cash with some attorney to write a letter to ask me to change the particular product name that we were using that they felt was infringing on the term Speedo. And so it was really funny because my partner is an accountant, and he was like, "Oh, no, no, this is bad. We got to just change the name." And I was like, "No, man, we're staying to our guns." Like, because if we think about this is nothing different than the bully in the playground. Like, we know they're big, they know we know they're big, and they're expecting us to fold. I was like, "No way, man. Like, I'm legit. I'm keeping the name.
Mm-hmm.
Come after me." Right. And not only did they come after us, we won it, by the way, won the lawsuit. But they came back 3 different times to try to buy us, right? So I'm hopeful in some little tiny way, like, as a startup, standing my ground, that I was saying to them, look, I believe what I did was legit, and I wasn't infringing on you, and I'm trying to rise all boats with this tide, and you should embrace that. And ultimately they did, and they're good friends of mine still today, and I actually really like that. This is the funny thing, I think, with when you talk about competition, that we were very lucky as a startup. I think partly because it's a bit of my personality that I don't overly like conflict, that I became friends with all of our competitors, and we're still friends today because they respected what I did, and I was always incredibly transparent about the challenges that we had as a startup, and was looking for help in the industry to rise up with me.
Now, Paul is a special case. Some of us would get a letter from a competitor and we would panic. Paul was excited. So this is a perfect segue into our next partner. And support for 614 Startups comes from the law firm of Dickinson Wright, with around 500 attorneys working from 19 offices across the US and Canada. They handle all types of business transactional law, including advising privately held and venture-backed companies in capital raising, mergers and acquisition, and transactions involving technology, software, data, and e-commerce. Partner Alex Brown serves as outside general counsel to startup companies ranging from business entity selection and formation, protection and commercialization of technology assets, conducting business online, and data security issues. And I'm sure they'll help you with trademark and choosing your name so you don't get that letter like Paul probably did. For more information, visit dickinsonwright.com. All right, Paul, let's keep this thing going. Let's talk about innovation at Ohio State and your role there.
Yeah, we have a really unique path, I believe, because when we decided to focus the center's activities on how do we create a innovation ecosystem with corporate partners and engaging a student population to try to create a pathway for students that aren't necessarily taking courses in innovation. There's no major in innovation, but it's on everybody's lips nowadays. So let's take corporate partners who want to have this pipeline, and they in fact want to understand what these terms mean themselves, and then create a center where we are both facilitating conversations about what innovation process really looks like and how to measure it and how to inspire up to your CEO to want to spend more and sponsor projects. And then how do we create programs, experiential programs for students to start to see what innovation really looks like. And this is where I think that I'm really stoked to actually be on the program, because I think that too oftentimes people believe entrepreneurship and innovation are really on different planes, or that corporate innovation is different than startup entrepreneurship. It really, in my book, isn't. You're still going through a process of understanding and empathizing with your customer and really trying to unwind a problem and create a sustainable business case. Just the end result's different. You're either going to launch a company yourself and be an entrepreneur, or you're going to bring that idea within a corporate setting where you can scale faster, you have deeper support, and that you can maybe in fact impact more people faster, right? And I think that to me is very interesting. And getting that concept in a student's head that they can create a growth mindset that allows them to think of large scale problems without being intimidated, but having the confidence to be able to solve them, so that when they go in and they work for a Honda or an AEP or JP Morgan Chase, that they can actually pose a new and unique idea and pose it in a way with supported customer validation, like they're a startup, that company is going to take it seriously and consider putting it into their innovation portfolio of new products. Like there's a very blurry line nowadays between startups and corporate innovation, in my book.
Yeah, and you see it everywhere. A lot of local companies partnering with studios and venture funds and labs, yep, et cetera, to try to get that innovation engine jump started. So it sounds like, if I have this correctly, when you're engaging with your corporate partners, the value to doing this is just that, right? This is an opportunity to spark innovation and have another channel by which innovation can come your way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, again, for me, the most interesting point of connection is when corporate sponsor says, here's this challenge area that we want to explore with a student through our program called Onramp. This is a challenge question that we want to explore. That challenge question is no different than a startup saying, I want to address this particular problem, and I think there's going to be a market for that. But what starts to happen is, as we go through our 11-week accelerator, we find more and more people from that company showing up and saying, tell me more about this. How did you do validation? Where did you find those customers? How do you translate data from an interview into an insight? How do you translate an insight into a business use case, right? So we're finding more people that are saying, I want to learn how to do that. And for us, the coolest thing, particularly being in a university our size, is that we have 15 colleges, and our programs represent about 12 different of those colleges. So it's not as if we have a company coming to us and saying, we work with Smucker. So a James Smucker company that comes to us and they don't say, we want only food science students. They say, we want to talk to business students, we want to talk to nursing students, we want to talk to a philosophy student. That diversity of thought is such a strong foundation to create new ideas. And oftentimes a company doesn't have that sort of diversity of mindset that allows them to be that widely exploring. And to be realistic, it's a challenge for a corporation to embrace this concept of, oh, we should fail fast and we should celebrate failure. Yeah, that's great up until your review time, and then somebody's like, you know what? Maybe that idea didn't really work very well. So where's your wins, right? So innovation is also a process of changing the culture within those organizations to embrace learning and not just automatically put a standard business ROI on innovation. It's just a completely different approach.
Yeah, and speaking of great Ohio companies, J.M. Smucker, I mean, I just think jelly. But
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why you think jelly is because Smucker's is such a powerful brand on its own, but they have
Yeah.
been able to stand up a lot of other global brands all under
Yeah.
the Smucker umbrella. And to talk about innovation, their willingness to go into new markets. I know they have a pet food division and a lot of other
Yep.
things that a lot of people don't know
Yeah.
that,
Coffee. I mean, they're one of the largest coffee producers in the US. I
right,
mean,
right.
and they're sitting right up in Orville, Ohio, in one of the most beautiful facilities you ever saw. And that is one of the most innovative companies. And you know why? I think it's because they are open-minded. They are just flat out saying, I mean, when vice president of their food R&D says to me, we know that if we don't begin to push innovation, how can we expect that Jif is going to be a strong brand in 10 years? It's really easy for a company, and we see evidence of it every day. My brand is so strong, I guarantee, I'm certain that it'll be here in 10 years, which my response is always, I'm certain it won't.
Mhm.
So that to me is the exciting thing. When you start to find those entrepreneurially minded people within these organizations, and they are looking for support of a center like ours and students like ours that pose these just absolutely crazy ideas. And then the company says like, wow, that'd be cool if we could actually do that. Now imagine that is really a startup idea. But then the company says, oh, but by the way, we have distribution in 16,000 outlets in the US that we can dump that into within 2 months. That's a much different scale model
All
from a
right.
startup.
So let's talk now. Yeah, because that distribution, their ability to take an idea from just an idea to the marketplace, is
Yeah.
phenomenal. Let's talk about the value proposition for the student. So now we understand it from the participating sponsor, but
Yeah.
from a student's perspective, how do you guys identify a student that would be a good fit for this program? Is there an application process? And then what do they get out of it that you
Yeah.
would say, hey, if you have any inclination to start and grow businesses, this is something that you should do?
Yeah. That's a great question, because there was some concern when we launched Onramp in the summer of 2018. The question was, do we think that we could attract a diverse enough population of students who would be interested? We had 20 positions available at the time. We had 160 applicants with one email, right? I mean, we have 2,000 students in our database right now and have put about 350 students through the paid program. So this is not a class. This is an extracurricular paid research project with a sponsor. The students get paid. We treat them like employees. They're under confidentiality. And what we say to them in the application is, tell us why you have an entrepreneurial mindset. And typically, if a student says, well, I want to come and be part of OnRamp because I want to work for company X, we say, well, look, this is not a placement service. What we want is for you to come in with a beginner's mindset. We want you to come in and play this S card, this student card, that allows you to not have the legacy of that company, to not worry about the problems of that company, and be willing to explore any ideas that are going to be boiled out of this data. The other thing that we love about this, so if you start talking to students about, we're going to give you an opportunity to be paid. Okay, let's be realistic. Students they need money, right? So if you have an opportunity to get paid, we're going to run you through a rigorous 11-week accelerator that I would put up against any accelerator in the country right now. And you're going to work with a Fortune 100 company who's going to listen to your pitch. And at the end of it, you're going to be able to say to any next company, startup or established firm, I've been through an accelerator. Here's the process that we've gone through. I understand design thinking and jobs to be done. And here's an example of an idea that we've put into practice. That's a pretty compelling position, I think, a pretty compelling idea to put in front of a student. And we've been really lucky to have students who just embody that mindset. This is something I think I want to really push out there. I love Venture for America, that program that puts students into startups, because I think too many people are really quick to want to dismiss a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. You know what? Go talk to someone. They're brilliant. They're absolutely, and if you give them an opportunity to say, I'm going to show you a process that you can start to explore, a concept space with a particular audience, and then I don't do it for them. We say, it's on you. You go do that. They go do it, and they come back with crazy insights, because people don't lie to students. You know this, the work you're in. If you send out a professional market research firm, not dismissing professional market research, they have a great position, but your average person wants to lie to them about what they ate for breakfast that morning. People don't lie to students. They tell them the truth. And then students don't know to candy coat the response, right? Because they're not trying to sell the next project. The student says, you told me this, I'm going to write down what you said verbatim, and I'm going to take my insight from that. I'm not going to try to use that as, the nail that I'm going to try to hammer in later. Like they don't start off with a solution. And there's a beginner mindset to that that's so refreshing. And that's probably the one thing we try to protect the most, because I know, and I literally just placed a student today, hopefully with a startup, and it was driven on the idea that, look, this student, it was willing to try anything and is so highly productive that this will be a valuable asset for you from day one. That to me is exciting,
That's terrific. Now, have you ever had a situation where a company was so impressed by the work of a team that they wanted to snatch them like day one for the execution of whatever idea they came up with?
Yeah, we've had right now pushing 20 of our students actually move into positions with our sponsors, and of course we love that, because what we want to do, we want to enable those students. We have a particular student who had a heavy engineering background. He had a job with a huge corporation down in Cincinnati, in P&G, and he said, you know what, I love this innovation process, but I'm not sure that my job at P&G is going to support that, because I'm going to be working in an engineering role. And we said, well, let's make sure that we connect you and that you get connected with the innovation folks at P&G. In less than 2 years, he's working as an internal, essentially an entrepreneur in residence for P&G, doing something completely different than what he had as his major, but absolutely driven out of what he picked up through going through 3 semesters of accelerators with us. And he was a spectacular young guy. Like, he was going to end up doing great things wherever he went. So to me, that's the exciting thing, is if we can put students out and they've gone through a rigorous process and they can speak a language within a large corporation that they've not heard about, relating to essentially startup principles, right? Identifying the problem, being comfortable with the fuzzy front end, creating customer validation. These are terms that are still a bit of a mystery to a lot of big companies. And so I love the fact that we can create this whole core of entrepreneurs and then give them an opportunity realistically to go work for a company and maybe pay off their student loans, because I think that's an important thing,
Mm-hmm.
and or go out and work for a startup and be and be impactful from right off the start. Like that's fantastic. I mean, you can see that I'm passionate about it, right?
Oh yeah.
Because to me, this is, I mean, maybe it's more exciting than anything I've done in my career because I get to work with these students that just come up with stuff that you go, oh my God, I never would have got that. Right? That's super fun.
Now, before we wrap, I have a very important question for you. I'm gonna give you some time to think about this, right? What is the value of a college education? Hold that thought. One more final break here while you think about it, in a word from our sponsor. So at 614 Startups, we're making a lot of changes. Some of those changes include a new website, a rebrand, updates in marketing and growth strategy. Undertaking all of that marketing is a lot to do as a founder, and sometimes it's overwhelming. So naturally, I turn to our sponsor, Studio MFP, for help. In order for us to take our branding and marketing to the next level, check them out for a free consultation at studiomfp.com and start growing your business today. All right, sir. All right, one of the most important issues of the 21st century, the value of a college education. What are your thoughts on that?
Value of a college education. That is really a huge question. I think I have two thoughtful answers to, right? Particularly related to entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurs will be very quick to say, quit school, get out there, start launching your company, go at it, go at it, go at it. I don't disagree. That's what you're going to do if you've got something that's good. But the reality is that doesn't fit to most 18, 19, 20 year olds because of two things. They don't have a network yet, right? I mean, think about your network and think about the importance of being able to find people to support you at all different aspects of your company as you grow your company, right? So we look at that as maybe the one most important thing that we want you to gain. We want that 18 to 22 or 23-year-old to build is this network. And it's not just a network of their peers, but we encourage them, like, go out, listen to your podcast, go to Rev One's events, go to pitch competitions, build a network of people that recognize you and your interest in engaging that community. So that's the first thing. Build your network and begin to make industry connections. And the second, and this is a subtle answer to me, a really, really important question that gets answered in all sorts of ways. When people say, well, stay in school and get a degree. I'm not worried about staying in school and getting a degree. What I want them to do is stay in school and develop a deep subject matter expertise in something, right? I'm a really firm believer in the T-shaped individual. Show me a broad level of interest and understanding of a lot of different topics, but give me some deep matter expertise. I'm a designer by background. I never paid for a website, a logo, a product, a CAD file, right? I want that student to have a deep expertise in something that they don't have to pay for later when they've started their startup. And they may say, "Oh, but I came up with the idea. I have the inspiration." Yeah, well, after that, what good are you to your own startup? Because you're going to start paying for everything.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got an accounting degree, guess what? You've just taken a huge number off your books, right? If you can program, fantastic. You've taken that off your books. You can actually be an asset, a skill asset to your own startup by having some deep subject matter expertise that I believe you can learn through a college education. And it's demonstrated through proficiency, not through a diploma. So how's that for an answer?
It's a ringing endorsement for the college experience. I still do believe that there's a tremendous amount of value in the college experience, but I think for the future that we're building and taking what we knew from the apprenticeship kind of era of education, the
Yeah,
vocational technical aspects of education, and integrating it more with the academics where they're doing the practical things like working on a project for an actual company, not a case study in the abstract, right?
correct,
But real
correct.
companies, real customers, real world implications. I think we can get a lot more students excited about going to school because the work that they're doing in school has a real world impact. All right, Paul, listen, I want to cover so many more things with you. Maybe you can extend the invitation. I'll come out to the center. Maybe you can do the interviewing next time because there's
I
so
would love
much
that.
to talk about, but we got a wrap right here. So thank you so much for coming on the show. That's a wrap, folks. You can find this and all of our episodes on our website, 614startups.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and all your favorite podcasting platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and write a review. If you would like to have updates sent to your inbox, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter on the website. To engage in the 614 Startups community, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at 614 Startups to join the conversation. For sponsorship opportunities, so many great sponsors and collaborations, email us at info@614startups.com. Almost forgot to do this, Paul. I always do my one takeaway. And listen, when you are a threat, be on the lookout for the big dogs in your industry trying to intimidate you. But stick to your guns. Never be intimidated. Believe in your dreams. All right, folks. Thank you for joining me on another episode. Peace.